The champagne flute in Julian Thorne's hand was sweating, a cold counterpoint to the humid, electric heat of the engagement party. Around him, the elite of Manhattan buzzed like locusts in silken velvet. They were gathered in the Obsidian, the triplex penthouse Julian had designed himself, a marvel of black steel and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking Central Park. "Smile, darling," Elena whispered, her hand slipping into the crook of his arm. Her touch, usually grounding, felt frantic tonight. She was radiant in a backless emerald gown that cost more than Julian's first car. "The investors from the Hudson Group are watching. We need to look like the power couple of the century." "We are the power couple of the century," Julian said, softening his voice to match the intimacy of the moment. He kissed her temple, smelling the expensive tuberose perfume she wore only for galas. "Are you happy, Elle?" Elena looked up, her eyes shimmering with the reflection of the crystal chandeliers. "I have everything I've ever wanted, Julian. Everything." She squeezed his arm and then pulled away. "I need to check on the caterers. The oysters are running low. Don't vanish on me." Julian watched her glide through the crowd, accepting compliments and air kisses with the grace of a queen holding court. He felt a swell of pride so intense it bordered on pain. He was an architect who built structures to withstand hurricanes and earthquakes, but Elena was the only thing that made his life feel truly stable. 20 minutes later, the jazz band's audio system began to glitch. A high-pitched feedback loop whined through the hidden speakers, causing guests to wince and cover their ears. Julian, ever the perfectionist, signaled the confused bandleader to stop. "I'll handle it," Julian muttered to his assistant. "It's the server sync. The smart home integration is overlapping with their soundboard." He slipped away from the noise, entering the quiet, temperature-controlled sanctuary of the server room, located behind the main kitchen. It was a small, dark space, illuminated only by the blue hum of racks and monitors. This was the brain of the house, controlling everything from the humidity of the wine cellar to the security cameras. Julian sat at the master console, typing in his override code. He quickly isolated the audio feed and rerouted the band's input, killing the screeching feedback. Silence returned to the system. He sighed, rubbing his temples. He was about to stand up when a movement on the tertiary monitor caught his eye. The screen displayed a grid of 16 live security feeds from around the penthouse. Most showed the party guests, laughing, drinking, dancing. But the feed labeled CM04 West Library was different. The West Library was a secluded, soundproofed study at the far end of the hallway, intended for private calls. It was currently occupied. Julian leaned in, frowning. The infrared night vision had switched to color mode because someone had turned on the dim reading lamp. He saw the emerald dress first. It was hiked up around a waist he knew better than his own. Elena was pressed against the mahogany desk, her head thrown back, her hands gripping the lapels of a man's tuxedo. The man wasn't a stranger. The slicked-back blonde hair and the heavy signet ring were unmistakable. It was Silas. Elena's cousin, technically a second cousin, the black sheep of her family who managed their dwindling trust fund. The man Julian had just shaken hands with an hour ago. The man Julian had invited out of courtesy to Elena. Julian's breath stopped. His heart didn't race. It simply seized, a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He stared at the screen, unable to blink. The audio feed for that room was active. The high-fidelity microphones designed to pick up voice commands picked up everything. "God, Silas," Elena's voice came through the speakers, breathless and guttural. It wasn't the polished voice she used at the party. It was raw. "Careful, my hair." "He's too busy playing host," Silas sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance as he kissed her neck. "The architect, the builder, boring as hell, Elle. Are you sure you can handle a lifetime of him?" Julian's hand hovered over the keyboard. His fingers were trembling, but his mind felt strangely detached, as if he were watching a movie about someone else's life imploding. Elena laughed, a low, throaty sound Julian hadn't heard in months. "I'm not marrying him for the conversation, Silas. I'm marrying him because the banks are closing in on Dad. Julian is the lifeboat. Once the merger is signed next week, I'm safe. We're safe." "And what about this?" Silas asked, pulling her closer. "This?" Elena whispered, grabbing his face. "This is how I stay sane. Julian is the safety net. You're the fire." Julian watched as they continued, oblivious to the camera blinking in the corner of the ceiling. He watched the woman he had planned to grow old with, the woman he had just pledged his life to, reduce him to nothing more than a financial transaction, a safety net, a bore. The nausea hit him then, violent and sudden. He spun the chair around, squeezing his eyes shut, fighting the urge to vomit on the pristine server room floor. He sat there for a long time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. The feedback loop in his head was louder than the audio system ever was. Every "I love you," every touch, every promise she had made in the last 2 years replayed in his mind, now tainted, rotting in the light of this new truth. He looked back at the screen one last time. They were fixing their clothes now. Elena was checking her lipstick in the reflection of the window. She looked perfect, untouched, innocent. Julian reached into his pocket. The velvet box containing the wedding band, a custom design he was going to surprise her with later that night, felt like lead. He didn't storm out. He didn't grab the microphone and broadcast the feed to the party guests. That was what a weaker man would do. That was what a man who acted on emotion would do. Julian Thorne was an architect. He understood structure. He understood that if you wanted to bring a building down effectively, you didn't smash the windows. You removed the load-bearing walls. He placed the velvet box on the server desk, directly under the glow of the monitor, showing his fiancée straightening her traitorous lover's tie. Then, Julian took out his phone. He opened his banking app, then his secure email. He composed a single message to his legal team, marked urgent, effective immediately. He stood up, straightened his own tuxedo jacket, and walked out the back service exit of the penthouse into the cool, indifferent Manhattan rain. Inside, the party raged on, toasting a groom who was no longer there. The rain in New York City didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Julian drove his Aston Martin DB11 through the empty arteries of the financial district. The engine's low purr was the only sound filling the cabin, a mechanical heartbeat replacing the one in his chest that felt arrested, frozen in mid-beat. He had been driving for hours, from the Upper East Side to the Brooklyn Bridge, and now down into the cavernous canyons of Wall Street. The city was asleep, a rare state of vulnerability for the metropolis. But Julian was wide awake. His eyes were dry, burning with the granular fatigue of shock. Every time he blinked, he didn't see the wet asphalt. He saw the screen. Km 4, the emerald dress, the way Elena's head tilted back, a gesture he used to think was reserved for him. "Safety net," he whispered to the empty car. The words tasted like ash. He tightened his grip on the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. It wasn't the infidelity that was killing him. People cheated. He knew the statistics. It was the calculation, the architectural precision of her deceit. She hadn't just slipped up. She had engineered a relationship based on his utility. He was a load-bearing wall in the crumbling structure of the Vance family dynasty, and nothing more. He pulled the car over near the Battery Park Esplanade, looking out at the dark water of the harbor. The Statue of Liberty was a faint shadow in the distance, unlit and indifferent. Julian unlocked his phone. 3:47 a.m. There were 42 missed calls, 20 from Elena, 10 from his mother-in-law-to-be, a woman who looked at Julian the way a shark looks at a seal. 12 from various party planners and guests, wondering where the groom had vanished. He scrolled past them all, his thumb hovering over a contact named Harrison, legal. He remembered a conversation from 2 weeks ago. Elena's father, Marcus Vance, had sat in Julian's office, sweating through his Italian suit. The Vance family hedge fund was under SEC scrutiny, and their liquidity was non-existent. They needed a guarantor for a bridge loan of $12 million to keep the creditors at bay until their big merger next quarter. "It's just a formality, Julian," Marcus had said, his hands shaking slightly as he poured a scotch. "Just a signature to show the bank we have backing. You won't pay a dime. Elena doesn't even need to know." But Elena did know. That was clear now. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was the deadline for the bailout. Once they were married, Julian's assets would be legally entangled with hers, making it infinitely harder for him to extricate himself from her family's sinking ship. Julian lowered the window. The cold, damp air slapped his face, sharpening his senses. The numbness was receding, replaced by a clarity that felt almost surgical. He pressed the call button. It rang 4 times before a groggy, confused voice answered. "Julian, it's 4 in the morning. Is everything all right? Did the party run late?" "Harrison," Julian said. His voice was steady, stripped of all inflection. "I need you to access the cloud drive. Folder labeled Vance Portfolio." There was a rustling of sheets on the other end, then the sound of a lamp clicking on. Harrison was Julian's oldest friend and his fiercest attorney. "Julian, talk to me. What's going on? You sound hollow." "The guarantor agreement for Marcus Vance's bridge loan," Julian continued, ignoring the question. "The one scheduled to be countersigned by the bank at 9 o'clock a.m. tomorrow morning. Is it locked in yet?" "No," Harrison yawned, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. "It's in the final review queue. The digital signature is pending the bank's opening hours. Why?" "Withdraw it." The typing stopped abruptly. "Excuse me?" "Withdraw the guarantee. Rescind my signature. Send a formal notice to the lender that I am terminating my involvement with the Vance Trust immediately due to—" Julian paused, watching a police boat cut through the water in the distance. "Due to a material breach of trust and undisclosed liabilities." "Julian," Harrison's voice lost its sleepiness, becoming sharp and professional. "If you pull that guarantee, the loan collapses. Marcus defaults on his existing credit lines by noon. The domino effect. It will trigger an immediate audit. They'll be insolvent by the end of the week. This isn't just a burnt bridge. This is a nuclear strike." "I know," Julian said. "Does Elena know you're doing this?" "Elena is the reason I'm doing this." Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Harrison didn't ask for details. He knew Julian well enough to know that Julian Thorne didn't make impulsive decisions. If Julian was burning a building down, it was because he had found rot in the foundation that couldn't be fixed. "Okay," Harrison said softly. "I can file the revocation now. It'll hit the bank's server at 8 o'clock a.m. sharp. But Julian, once I hit enter, there's no taking it back. The Vance family will be ruined." Julian looked at the passenger seat where his phone lay. A new text from Elena popped up on the lock screen. "Baby, where are you? People are worried. Please come back. I love you so much." He looked at the words. He tried to feel something. Anger, pity, nostalgia. But there was nothing. Just the cold logic of an equation balancing itself out. "Do it," Julian commanded. "And Harrison, draft a press release for my firm. Thorne Architecture announces separation from Vance Projects. Keep it vague but definitive." "Understood. Consider it done." Julian ended the call. He sat there for another moment, listening to the rain tap against the metal roof of the car. The deed was done. The mechanism was in motion. When the sun rose over the city, the life Elena thought she had secured would vaporize. He put the car in gear. He wasn't going back to the penthouse. He had a small, unfinished loft in Dumbo, a raw space he used for sketching. No smart systems, no cameras, just brick and silence. As he pulled away from the curb, the first gray light of dawn began to bleed into the sky, pale and unforgiving. The night was over. The morning had come. And for the Vance family, it was going to be a very long day. The sun over Manhattan didn't rise gently. It assaulted the city with a blinding, white clarity. Inside the master bedroom of the obsidian penthouse, the light sliced through the gap in the blackout curtains, hitting Elena Vance directly in the eyes. She groaned, rolling over and burying her face in the Egyptian cotton pillows. Her head felt like it was being split open by a dull axe, the inevitable price of mixing vintage champagne with the stress of maintaining a double life. "Julian?" she croaked, her voice raspy. She reached out a hand to the other side of the California king bed. The sheets were cold. Not just cool, but pristine, as if no one had slept there at all. Elena pushed herself up, squinting against the glare. The room was silent. Usually by this hour, the digital clock read 10:15 a.m. Julian would have been up for hours. The smell of his freshly ground espresso should have been wafting from the kitchen, and the low murmur of CNBC should have been drifting from the living area. "Julian?" she called out again, louder this time. Silence. Annoyance pricked at her. He was probably sulking. He had disappeared halfway through the party last night, leaving her to make excuses to the guests. He's so sensitive, she thought, swinging her legs out of bed. She assumed he was upset, that she hadn't spent enough time with him, or perhaps he was stressed about the investors. Julian was a man of moods, quiet, brooding moods, and she had become an expert at managing them. She grabbed her silk robe, wrapping it tight around her waist. She needed coffee, 2 Advil, and a very convincing apology speech to smooth things over. She walked out into the main hallway. The penthouse was a wreck. The cleaning crew wasn't scheduled until noon, so the remnants of the engagement party were still scattered everywhere. Half-empty flutes, discarded napkins, and the confetti that looked like dirty snow on the black marble floors. But it was the stillness that felt wrong. "Maria?" Elena called out for the housekeeper. "Cook?" No answer. The kitchen was empty. The espresso machine was cold. There was no fruit platter, no morning paper, no note. Elena frowned, a seed of unease planting itself in her stomach. Julian was meticulous. He never left without saying goodbye, and he certainly never let the staff slack off. She walked into the living room, her bare feet sticking slightly to a patch of dried champagne. She picked up her phone from the coffee table where she had abandoned it the night before. The screen was flooded with notifications. 12 missed calls from Dad, 8 missed calls from Silas, 5 missed calls from Harrison, Julian's lawyer. Her stomach turned. Why was Silas calling? And why her father? She unlocked the phone and tapped on her father's last text message, sent at 9:05 a.m. "Dad, pick up the phone, Elena. The bank just called. They're freezing the accounts. Where is Julian? Why did he pull the guarantee?" Elena stopped walking. The words blurred on the screen. Pull the guarantee? That wasn't possible. Julian had signed the papers 3 days ago. It was done. It was the bedrock of their entire future. Before she could process the text, the intercom buzz at the front entrance screamed through the apartment. It wasn't the polite chime of the concierge. It was the urgent, repeated buzz of someone who wasn't going away. Elena stared at the door. A cold dread washed over her, instantly sobering her up. She tightened her robe, fixing her hair with trembling hands, and walked to the video monitor. She expected to see Julian, maybe furious, maybe drunk. Instead, the monitor showed 3 men in dark suits standing in the private elevator lobby. They weren't doormen. They held leather portfolios and wore expressions of professional indifference. "Mrs. Vance?" A voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Agent Miller from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, accompanied by representatives from Chase Private Client. We need you to open the door." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Federal agents? "Julian isn't home," she said, her voice shaking. You need to make an appointment." "This isn't a social call, Ms. Vance," the voice replied, harder this time. "We have a writ of attachment for the assets located at this address, pending the investigation into the Vance Charity Trust. Mr. Thorne has formally disavowed the property and rescinded his financial liability as of 8:00 a.m. this morning. Access to this penthouse has been revoked." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. He disavowed the property. She stumbled back from the monitor. This wasn't just a breakup. This wasn't Julian needing space. She ran back to the bedroom, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She grabbed her phone and dialed. Julian. Straight to voicemail. She dialed Silas. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." She froze. Silas, the man who had sworn to protect her, the man who had laughed with her about Julian's stupidity just 12 hours ago, had disconnected his phone. He was gone. He had smelled the smoke and run, leaving her inside the burning building. The banging on the front door began. It was a polite but firm knock, the sound of authority that knew it would eventually get in. Elena looked around the bedroom, the room she thought she owned, the life she thought she had secured. It felt suddenly alien, like a stage set after the lights had been cut. She saw the closet door ajar. She ran to it, throwing it open. Julian's side was empty. His suits were gone. His watches were gone. Even the shoeboxes were gone. It was as if he had never existed. On the center island of the walk-in closet, sitting alone on the velvet surface, was a small object. Elena walked over to it, her legs feeling like jelly. It was the engagement ring box, the one he was supposed to give her last night. She opened it. Inside there was no diamond. There was a small, black USB drive, and a note written in Julian's precise, architectural handwriting. "I saw everything. The server room records audio too. Checkmate, Elena." The knocking at the front door grew louder. "Ms. Vance, open the door, or we will be forced to use the master key provided by the leaseholder." Elena dropped the box. The plastic clatter against the floor sounded like a gunshot. She sank to her knees on the plush carpet, the realization crashing down on her with the weight of a collapsing skyscraper. Julian hadn't just left her. He had dismantled her. He had waited until the precise moment when she was most vulnerable, and he had removed the floor from under her feet. She was alone. She was broke. And the world was knocking at her door to collect a debt she couldn't pay. The humiliation wasn't in the eviction itself. It was in the audience. Elena Vance was escorted out of the spire, not in handcuffs, but under the polite, iron-gripped supervision of federal agents. The lobby was crowded. It was 11:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, meaning the building was teeming with residents, dog walkers, and delivery staff. She kept her sunglasses on, her chin raised at a defiant angle, clutching her Louis Vuitton weekender bag, the only luggage they had allowed her to pack immediately. She walked past the concierge, a man she had tipped generously for 2 years. He didn't look at her. He was busy studying a tablet, studiously ignoring the woman who, just yesterday, had been the queen of the building. "We'll be in touch regarding the remaining personal effects," Agent Miller said as they reached the curb. "Do not attempt to access any accounts linked to the Vance Trust. They are frozen. Have a nice day, Ms. Vance." He left her standing on the sidewalk. No black car waiting, no driver, just the indifferent noise of Manhattan traffic. Elena hailed a taxi, her hands trembling so badly she could barely open the door. "The St. Regis," she snapped at the driver. She needed luxury. She needed a fortress. In the back seat, she pulled out her phone. She expected it to be blowing up with concerned messages from Silas. Instead, there was radio silence. She tried his number again. "The subscriber you are calling is not accepting calls at this time." "Coward," she hissed, slamming the phone against her thigh. Silas had always been weak, a parasite living off the family name, but she never thought he would leave her to face the firing squad alone. She checked into the hotel using her personal Amex, one of the few cards not linked to the family trust. The receptionist smiled, oblivious to the fact that the woman standing before her was technically homeless and on the brink of bankruptcy. Once inside the suite, the facade crumbled. Elena threw her bag onto the bed and scrambled to find her laptop. She dug the black USB drive out of her pocket, the one Julian had left in the ring box. She jammed it into the port. A video file popped up. CAM04 Master Audio MP4. She clicked play. The screen filled with the high-definition image of the library. She saw herself. She saw Silas. She heard the moans, the laughter, the cruel jokes about Julian being boring and a safety net. Elena watched the entire 4 minutes without blinking. She didn't feel shame. She didn't feel guilt. She felt indignant. "He was spying on me," she whispered, her voice rising in disbelief. "He violated my privacy. That pervert." Her mind, honed by years of high-stakes public relations, began to spin. The truth on the screen didn't matter. The narrative mattered. Julian had recorded her without consent. He had abandoned her. He had financially nuked her family without a conversation. "He's hurting," she told herself, pacing the room. "He's lashing out because his ego is bruised. He doesn't want to leave me. He wants me to beg." She knew Julian. He was soft. He was sentimental. He kept every ticket stub from their dates. A man like that didn't turn off his feelings overnight. He was bluffing. This was a power play. She sat on the edge of the bed and dialed Julian's number again. When it went to voicemail, she didn't hang up. She took a deep breath, pitched her voice into a register of tearful, fragile desperation, and began to speak. "Julian. Oh God, Julian, where are you? I'm at the St. Regis. The feds. They kicked me out. I'm scared." She paused for effect, letting a sob catch in her throat. "I found the drive. Baby, you misunderstood what you saw. It wasn't what it looked like. Silas, he was drunk. He was aggressive. I was trying to push him away, trying to calm him down so he wouldn't cause a scene at our party. I said those things just to placate him, to get him off me. I did it for us, Julian. I was protecting us." She wiped a dry eye, checking her reflection in the mirror. She looked convincing. "Please," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "don't throw away 2 years over a misunderstanding. Don't let my family's mistakes destroy what we have. I love you. I'm waiting for you. Please come home." She hung up. For a moment, she actually believed it. It was the superpower of the narcissist, the ability to rewrite reality in real time until it fit the necessary shape. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. She needed a backup plan in case Julian was slower to forgive than usual. She opened Instagram. She hadn't posted anything about the breakup yet. Neither had he. The narrative was still up for grabs. She selected a photo from the party, a candid shot of her looking pensive and beautiful on the balcony, alone. She typed the caption, "Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you the deepest," trying to stay strong through the storm. It was vague enough to be about anything, but specific enough to garner sympathy. If Julian tried to release the video, she would claim it was deep fake or manipulated context. She would paint him as the abuser, the vindictive ex who threw her to the wolves. She hit post. Within seconds, the likes and comments started rolling in. Validation. Support. Elena smiled, a cold, tight expression. She wasn't done yet. Julian Thorne might have designed the building, but she knew how to control the demolition. "You want a war, Julian?" she whispered to the glass. "I'll give you a war." Her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, expecting Julian. It was a notification from her bank app. Alert. Transaction declined at St. Regis Hotel. Please contact your card issuer. Elena stared at the screen. Her personal Amex, the one account she thought was safe. Julian hadn't just frozen the trust. He had triggered the cross-default clauses. He had gone after everything. The smile vanished. For the first time, the denial cracked, and genuine terror peeked through. The conference room at Sterling and Croft was designed to intimidate. Located on the 45th floor of a steel monolith in Midtown, it offered a panoramic view of the city that made the people down below look like ants. The table was a 20-foot slab of gray marble, cold to the touch. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that discouraged lingering. Elena sat on one side of the table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide the tremors. She had spent the last 24 hours in a spiraling panic, trading her diamond earrings at a pawn shop just to secure a room at a mid-tier hotel after the St. Regis had politely evicted her. She checked her reflection in the polished surface of the table. She had opted for a modest white dress, the innocent victim look. No heavy makeup, just vulnerability. She needed Julian to see the girl he had fallen in love with, not the woman on the tape. The heavy oak doors opened. Elena stood up instinctively, a smile trembling on her lips. "Julian." Julian walked in. He was flanked by Harrison and a severe-looking woman with a tablet, a forensic accountant, Elena realized with a jolt. But it was Julian who held her attention. He looked different. The warm, slightly boyish softness around his eyes was gone. He was clean-shaven, dressed in a charcoal suit that was tailored to razor-sharp perfection. He moved with a mechanical efficiency that she didn't recognize. He didn't look tired. He looked lethal. "Julian," she breathed, stepping around the table to reach for him. "Thank God. This has been a nightmare. Sit down, Elena," Julian said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stop walking. He simply maneuvered around her outstretched hand as if she were a piece of furniture in the wrong place, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. Elena froze. The rejection was physical. It was a slap. She faltered, sinking back into her chair. "Julian, please, can we just talk? Just us? Without the lawyers?" "No," Julian said, opening a leather portfolio. He didn't look at her. He was studying a document. "Everything we say here is on the record, for your protection and mine." "Protection?" Elena's voice cracked. "I'm your fiancée. I'm the woman you're supposed to marry in 3 months." Julian finally looked up. His eyes were dark, calm, and utterly empty. It was like looking into the windows of an abandoned house. "We both know that's not true anymore," he said. Harrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Vance, we are here to discuss the terms of the dissolution of your engagement and the subsequent disentanglement of Mr. Thorne's assets from the Vance Trust." "I don't care about the assets," Elena cried, tears springing to her eyes, real tears this time, born of frustration. "I care about him. Julian, I left you a voicemail. Did you listen to it? That video, it was a misunderstanding. Silas forced himself on me. I was scared. I said what I had to say to get away from him." Julian stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then he reached for a remote control on the table and pointed it at the wall-mounted screen. "I listened to the voicemail, Elena," Julian said softly. "It was a very compelling performance, almost convinced me, but there was a discrepancy." He pressed a button. The screen flared to life. It wasn't the video of the sex, it was the video after. On the screen, Elena and Silas were adjusting their clothes. The physical act was over. Elena was standing by the window, using her compact mirror to fix her lipstick. She looked calm, composed. "God, that was risky," the on-screen Elena said, a smirk playing on her lips. "If the architect catches us, the whole plan goes to hell." "He won't," Silas's voice replied. "He's too busy making sure the napkins are folded correctly. He's a useful idiot, El." "He's my retirement plan," Elena said on the screen, laughing as she swatted Silas's arm playfully. "Just 2 more years. Once the prenup vesting period hits, I can divorce him, take half the firm, and we can finally buy that place in Como." Julian pressed pause. The image of Elena's laughing face, plotting the destruction of Julian's life, froze on the screen. In the conference room, the silence was absolute. Elena felt the blood drain from her entire body. She couldn't breathe. The rape defense, the misunderstanding narrative, it all disintegrated instantly. There was no spinning this. It was naked, cold-blooded malice. "You weren't scared," Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You weren't a victim. You were bored, and you were calculating exactly how much of my life you could harvest before discarding me." "Julian," she whispered, but the word came out as a croak. "The safety net," Julian quoted. "That's what I was, right? Well, Elena, the net is gone. You're in free fall." He slid a thick document across the marble table toward her. "What is this?" she asked, her hand shaking so hard she couldn't pick it up. "This is a confession," Harrison interjected. "It states that you knowingly conspired with Silas Vance to defraud Julian Thorne via the bridge loan guarantee. It admits that the financial data provided to Mr. Thorne was falsified." "Why would I sign this?" Elena hissed, a flash of her old arrogance surfacing. "This would send me to jail." "If you don't sign it," Julian said, leaning forward, "I release the unedited footage of your conversation in the library to the SEC and the district attorney, along with the forensic accounting report my team compiled last night." He pointed to the woman with the tablet. "Your father's charity is a shell, Elena. You've been laundering money for Silas's gambling debts for 3 years. I know. And if I hand this over, you won't just be broke. You, your father, and Silas will be in federal prison for 15 years. Elena stared at him. She looked for a crack in the armor, a sign of the man who used to bring her flowers on Tuesdays just because. "You loved me," she whispered, clutching at straws. "How can you do this to me?" Julian stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "I love the woman you pretended to be," he said. "I don't know who you are, but I know I'm done paying for you." He turned to the door. "Julian," she screamed, panic seizing her throat. "What happens if I sign?" Julian paused, his hand on the brass handle. He didn't look back. "If you sign, I bury the video. I walk away. The SEC will still audit your father, and you will still be bankrupt, but you'll be free to start over, from zero, just like I did." He opened the door. "You have 10 minutes to decide," Julian said. "After that, Harrison calls the DA." The door clicked shut behind him. Elena sat alone in the cold, expensive room, staring at the document that would end her life as she knew it. She looked at the frozen image of herself on the screen, so confident, so arrogant. She hated that woman. She picked up the pen. New York City has a short memory for tragedy, but an infinite capacity for scandal. 2 weeks after signing the confession in the gray conference room, Elena Vance stood on the corner of Madison Avenue and 64th Street. She pulled her trench coat tighter against the wind. It was a Burberry coat, a remnant of her old life, but now it felt less like a fashion statement and more like armor. She wasn't living at the St. Regis anymore. She wasn't even in Manhattan. She was crashing on the sofa of a college friend in Queens who was currently between jobs and asked too many questions. But today, Elena had to come back to the Upper East Side. She had a lunch meeting with Claire Sterling, the wife of a media mogul and one of the few people who hadn't blocked her number. Elena checked her reflection in a shop window. She looked tired. The stress of the SEC raids, which had stripped her father's home down to the studs, had carved hollows beneath her cheekbones. Julian had kept his word. The sex tape hadn't leaked, but he hadn't needed to destroy her reputation. The financial collapse of the Vance family had done that for him. The headline on the New York Post stand nearby screamed, "Vance charity fraud, millions missing. Architect fiancé exits just in time." Elena looked away, nauseous. The narrative had shifted. Julian was now painted as the prudent, ethical businessman who had discovered the rot and severed the limb to save himself. She was the daughter of the con artist. She walked into Le Jardin, the French bistro where she had practically held court for the last 3 years. The smell of truffle oil and expensive perfume hit her, a scent that used to smell like home, but now smelled like danger. The maitre d', a man named Henri, whom Elena had tipped thousands of dollars over the years, looked up from his podium. His smile, usually warm and reflexive, vanished the moment he recognized her. It was replaced by a tight, pained grimace. "Ms. Vance," Henri said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He didn't reach for a menu. "Hello, Henri. I'm meeting Claire Sterling. Is she at our usual table?" Elena asked, forcing a brightness into her voice she didn't feel. Henri hesitated. He looked around the dining room. The hum of conversation seemed to dip slightly. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed behind designer glasses. It was the social equivalent of a spotlight turning on. "Mrs. Sterling, called to cancel," Henri said, his eyes not meeting hers. "Just 5 minutes ago." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Cancel? Did she say why? Is she rescheduling?" "She left a message," Henri said stiffly. She said it would be inappropriate for her to be seen with a person of interest in a federal investigation. Her husband's legal team advised against it. The words hung in the air, brutal and sterile. Elena stood there, the heat rising in her cheeks. She could feel the gaze of the room on her back. The whispers started. A low, buzzing static. "That's her, the fraudster's daughter. I heard she was cheating on Thorne with her own cousin. Did you see her shoes? Last season." Elena turned to leave, desperate to escape. But the door opened, and a group of women walked in. It was the committee for the Met Gala. Her circle. Her people. Or they had been. Morgan, the chairwoman, stopped mid-laugh when she saw Elena blocking the entrance. The silence that fell over the group was deafening. "Morgan," Elena said, her voice trembling. She hated herself for sounding so weak. "I sent you an email about the—" "Elena," Morgan cut her off. Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was pitying. "Please, don't make a scene. We removed you from the committee board yesterday. The email must have gone to your spam." "Removed me?" Elena stepped back. "I raised $2 million for that fund. And we are currently auditing where that money actually went," Morgan said, her voice dropping to ice. She stepped around Elena as if avoiding a puddle of dirty water. "Excuse us." The group swept past her, a phalanx of cashmere and judgment. Elena stood alone in the entryway. She had been exiled. It wasn't a violent expulsion. It was a quiet closing of ranks. She was no longer one of them. She was a contagion. She pushed out of the restaurant, stumbling slightly onto the sidewalk. Her breathing was shallow. She needed to call someone, anyone. She pulled out her phone and, out of muscle memory, dialed Silas. "The number you have reached." She hung up. She had forgotten. Silas was gone, but not entirely. As she walked aimlessly down Madison Avenue, a large TV screen in the window of an electronics store caught her eye. It was broadcasting a cable news interview. The chyron read, "Exclusive. Silas Vance breaks silence from non-extradition country." Elena stopped dead. She pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. On the screen, Silas looked tan and relaxed, sitting on a terrace somewhere tropical. He wore a linen shirt and sunglasses. "I was a victim too," Silas was saying to the reporter, his face a mask of practiced sincerity. My uncle and my cousin, Elena, they controlled the books. I was just the face. I had no idea the charity funds were being diverted to cover their personal debts. When I found out, I was terrified. That's why I left. Elena stared, her mouth opening in a silent scream. He was lying. He was lying about everything. He was the one with the gambling debts. He was the one who taught her how to cook the books. And now, safely out of reach of U.S. law, he was pinning the entire scheme on her and her father. The reporter nodded sympathetically. And what about Julian Thorne? He was engaged to your cousin. Silas chuckled darkly on screen. Julian? Good man. Too good for her. I tried to warn him. I think he finally saw the light. Elena felt her knees give way. She slumped against the brick wall of the building, sliding down until she hit the pavement. Passers-by stepped around her, giving the weeping woman in the expensive coat a wide berth. This was the karma Julian had promised. He hadn't just taken her money. He had allowed the truth and the lies of the people she trusted to consume her. He had left her alone in a pit of vipers she had helped breed. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A notification from LinkedIn. Julian Thorne has updated his profile. Principal architect at Thorne & Associates. New project announced, the Horizon Center, Tokyo. He was moving on. He was building skyscrapers in Japan. He wasn't thinking about her. He wasn't angry. He was just gone. Elena sat on the dirty sidewalk of the Upper East Side, surrounded by the wealth she could no longer touch, and for the first time in her life, she realized she was completely, utterly invisible. 1 year later, Tokyo was a city of lights and infinite verticality, a place where the future seemed to arrive a few seconds earlier than the rest of the world. Julian Thorne stood on the observation deck of the newly completed Horizon Center. At 1,200 feet, the wind was fierce, whipping his coat around his legs, but the structure beneath him didn't sway. It was anchored by the dampening system he had spent 6 months perfecting, a system born from the idea that stability wasn't about being rigid, but about being able to absorb the shock without breaking. Mr. Thorne? Julian turned. A young journalist from Architectural Digest was standing near the safety railing, looking nervous. She had flown in from New York just for this interview. The light is perfect for the cover shot now, she said. Are you ready? Julian nodded, adjusting his cuffs. He walked toward the photographer, his movements easy and assured. He looked different than the man who had fled Manhattan a year ago. The lines around his eyes had deepened, giving him a rugged, weathered gravitation. He didn't look like a man who had been broken. He looked like a man who had been forged. So, Julian, the journalist asked, as the shutter began to click, this building is being hailed as your masterpiece. Critics are calling it the fortress. What inspired the design? It feels incredibly guarded, yet open. Julian looked out at the sprawling metropolis, a sea of neon and concrete. I learned that a foundation is everything, Julian said, his voice low and steady. You can cover a building in gold and glass. You can make it beautiful, but if the core isn't solid, it will collapse the moment the earth shakes. This building, it's honest. It shows its structure. It doesn't hide how it stands. Is that a philosophy you apply to your life now? She asked, probing gently. Julian smiled. It was a genuine smile, rare and brief. I'm learning to. He didn't think about the penthouse in New York. He didn't think about the engagement party. Those memories were no longer jagged shards of glass. They were just dust, swept away by the wind at 1,200 feet. He had rebuilt. And this time, he had built alone. New Jersey. 7,000 miles away, the rain was falling on a strip mall in Weehawken. It was a gray, relentless drizzle that turned the parking lot into a slush of oil and water. Elena Vance stood behind the hostess podium of the Olive Branch, a mid-range Italian chain restaurant that smelled perpetually of garlic bread and sanitizer. "Table for four?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing the required uniform, a black button-down shirt that was a size too big and polyester slacks that scratched her skin. "Yeah, booth. Not near the kitchen," the customer grunted, not looking at her. He was on his phone. "Right this way," Elena said. She grabbed 4 laminated menus and led them to booth 14. Her feet ached. She had been on them for 6 hours. Her shift didn't end until 10 o'clock p.m. Afterward, she would take the bus, because her credit score was too destroyed to lease a car, back to the studio apartment she shared with a roommate who stole her yogurt. Silas was still in Belize, or maybe Panama. She didn't know. He had stopped responding to her emails begging for a share of the hidden funds months ago. Her father was under house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor and blaming Elena for seducing Silas and ruining the family. She was alone, truly, completely alone. She walked back to the podium to wipe down the menus. Someone had left a magazine in the waiting area. It was a copy of Wired, but underneath it was a glossy architectural lifestyle magazine. Elena picked it up to throw it in the trash, but her hand froze. The cover was black and white, stark and artistic. A man stood in profile against the Tokyo skyline, looking powerful, untouchable, and devastatingly handsome. The architect of the new age, Julian Thorne, on rebuilding from the ashes. Elena stared at the face. It was the face she had kissed 1,000 times. The face she had laughed at with Silas, calling him boring, calling him a safety net. She opened the magazine with trembling fingers. The spread showed Julian's new life, his apartment in Roppongi Hills, his accolades. The final quote of the article was highlighted in bold text. "I used to think love was about securing a future," Thorne says. "I realized that the only future worth having is one you build with your own hands. I'm grateful for the past. It cleared the ground for something better." Elena felt a physical blow to her chest. Grateful. He was grateful. He didn't hate her. He didn't miss her. He had simply transcended her. To him, she was just the demolition crew that had cleared the lot for his masterpiece. She looked around the restaurant. The fake plastic vines on the ceiling, the scuffed linoleum, the angry customers waiting for pasta. This was her reality now. She had traded a king for a knave, and when the game ended, she was left holding nothing but a joker. "Miss, we've been waiting 10 minutes for water," a woman at table 6 snapped, waving her hand. Elena closed the magazine. She looked at Julian's face one last time, a face looking toward a horizon she would never see, and then slid the magazine into the trash bin. "I'm coming," Elena whispered. She smoothed her cheap polyester shirt, picked up a pitcher of water, and walked back into the noise, disappearing into the ordinary, gray life she had earned.